Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, this is Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. And today I have Courtney DeRonde, who is a CPA and managing partner of TDT CPAs and Advisors, a boutique advisory and accounting firm based in Des Moines, Iowa, who works with small family-owned businesses and nonprofit organizations. Courtney's firm helps overwhelmed successful leaders understand and maximize financial information so that it can achieve better results and move their organization to the next level. As an owner in her firm and managing partner, she also has firsthand experience running and scaling a small business. There's so much to unpack. We have so many similarities in the way we think, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the show today, Courtney.
Thanks so much for having me, Jonathan.
Awesome. So, hey, look, so you're a CPA and you work in leadership and personal development areas, like you're familiar with Enneagram and Colby, and you use EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, I think, for your business. These are things that I gather you've gotten involved in because you're running your own small business.
Absolutely. Yes. This firm has created a need for me to really understand more about myself, more about my team, and have some good tools that I can leverage. And then kind of my MO is to learn and develop something and then cascade it to my team. I'm an Enneagram 1. You mentioned the Enneagram. Mm-hmm. I'm the improver or the perfectionist. So my kind of built-in desire is to improve myself and the world around me. So learning something and then helping others learn it and utilize it to grow and improve is just how I'm wired. And it's proved to be a wonderful way to develop my own leadership skills and develop my team.
Yeah. Hey, that's a great one. And I've not done the Enneagram on myself, or if I did, it was back in the 80s. So long ago, I don't remember. I too am a perfectionist, and I think of it as an ownership liability, not so much of an asset. But because I'm so much of a perfectionist, I tend to lean into that a lot because I don't think anyone does it as well as I do certain things. And so I'm very detail oriented. Do you find it's an asset or a liability, and how do you manage that?
Yes, I think with all of the different personality types, the gift can also be the curse. And so for sure, I find my built-in desire to learn and to improve and to perfect things can be a wonderful asset, but it can also be very negative because I can come across as judgmental or like I am being like my expectations are unrealistic. And so definitely has to be kept in check, but that's true of any personality type. And I think the more we understand that about ourselves and start to catch when some of those negative aspects of our personality creep in and start to redirect and recognize that when I think I'm helping, it might sound to my husband or to my colleague like I'm being critical or judgmental. And that's not my intent, but knowing that can then change the way that we interact and lead.
I can so relate to that comment. I feel the same thing. I think I'm helping, but it comes across as maybe critical. I think I'm being constructive, but they think maybe or feel it's destructive. And so I don't know about you, Courtney, but one thing I've learned is that if I'm going to deliver some critical news or bad news, is to sandwich it with good news. Start with something really positive, something I like. Um, Gosh, I'll even admit to the fact that over the last year, I was doing a lot of dating because I was trying to find a next relationship, and I would meet a lot of people, and rather than ghost on them, I would like to give them some good news, tell them something I really liked about them, but then say I didn't think we were a fit, and then wish them luck. And so, as an example, pretty basic. You guys can laugh at it, but don't you find you need to do that with your people sometimes?
Yes, for sure. And I think that as for me, and sounds like for you too, Jonathan, as a perfectionist, one of the things that happens to us is we always spot what's wrong,
Right.
what's not good enough, and what we can miss so many wonderful things. So adopting that habit of I'm going to point out what's good
Yep.
before I point out what needs to be fixed or what could be better, it helps me to recognize that there's a lot of good and things don't have to be perfect to be good,
Yep.
but that my mind naturally goes to what's wrong. The whole house can be spotless and perfect and one pillow's out of place and like, what's with that pillow?
Yep. Yep.
Those things happen with our teams as well. And so I think that's a great way to just develop that habit, like you said, of sandwiching good with what could be improved. And then,
Yeah.
where do we go from here?
Yeah. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole with this, but what I do find is that as a perfectionist, it can take me off of my happiness. And I found a partner who I really love, and she's a very happy person, and she makes me focus on like what are the good things and being happy, and like gratitude is something that I've practiced. I've had to be really intentional about it because it doesn't come easy, because my default is to see the pillow that's out of place and the criticism. So like an old girlfriend said, knock that shit off. It was, excuse my French, but it was really helpful to think about
Mm-hmm.
that. So important as a leader of your own small business. You really have to develop yourself as a leader to be able to expand your firm and get people to follow you. And
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about your firm. How many folks are you at your business? Uh, Tell us a little about, if you have a vision for where you want to take it. And then I want to talk about something that I know is a really hot topic for you, and that's blind spots.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. So we are, as you mentioned in the intro, a CPA and business advisory firms. We've got about 70 team members throughout the state of Iowa, some working in office locations, some working remotely. We serve clients all throughout the state of Iowa, and we have clients all across the country. So we have been really over the last several years developing our internal systems to be able to work across all of our locations seamlessly, which then allowed us to work across the country serving clients using video calls and digital file transfers and just learning how to interact in a virtual or digital environment. And so our team helps small businesses and nonprofit organizations really understand how we can take financial information that captures what has happened and use it to make good decisions and to plan for the future. So we get into budgeting, forecasting, key performance metrics, just a whole slew of helping those leaders and owners use that information to make decisions and to achieve the goals that they have for their business. We're a mature business. We have been around for 46 years.
wow.
And have really evolved over time, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. In my transition into the managing partner role upon the retirement of our previous managing partner, had the opportunity to really be part of creating the vision for the future of the firm and how do we remain relevant to the clients that we serve through our approach and through our services and the way that we shape our culture and who we are so that we can recruit and retain team members in an industry that is known for burnout and long hours and resulting turnover.
Yeah. So I just want to, like, I don't know you well enough to give you a plug, but I'm going to give you a plug. If you are an entrepreneur, you're running a company and you don't have a CPA that is providing you with forward-looking intelligence about your financials based on historical information. If you have a CPA that only does a tax return, maybe gives you a few minimal ideas, then you don't have the right partner in your camp, and you need someone like Courtney and her team. And so kudos to you on elevating yourself through your company to become the managing partners. Kudos for you for building a 70 employee firm that provides this type of help with identifying key performance indicators, doing, providing financial intelligence. It's too often lacking with small business owners. They just don't get the right information and enough of the right information. So
yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. So I know one of the things you do is help business owners overcome common blind spots during their growth. And I think you and I think alike that there are some blind spots at different stages of your growth. And so I'd like to kind of walk through some of your thinking around what are the 5 blind spots of growth stage businesses. And let's define first what a growth stage business is.
Yeah. So a growth stage business, this is somebody who's made it past startup. Mm-hmm. And so they've found their product. They know what their customer needs and they're selling it. They've found their customer base and their product, and they've made it past startup. And now they're getting to this point where they're starting to grow. They're moving beyond, doing everything themselves, starting to leverage outsourced resources, contractors, maybe hiring some employees. And in this growth stage, it can go on for quite a while before you get to this mature stage where you start to determine, what's going to be, is there going to be a Gen 2? Is there going to be a sale? So this is the stage that we call growth, is between startup and maturity. Mm-hmm. It can also happen when a mature business goes through a reinvention. So I mentioned that's really the stage that we're in, where we got to the mature stage and then had to decide, do we remain independent? Do we merge with some bigger firm? If we remain independent, how do we stay relevant? And so we end up going back into this growth stage of trying to, find ways to stay relevant. So that's what we consider to be that growth stage.
Makes sense. You and I are on the same page there for sure.
Okay. And the blind spots, the way I think about this is, so often business owners and leaders are looking to achieve a certain next level. Mm-hmm. And you're working so hard and overcoming all of these challenges to get to this next level. And then you get there, and it can be surprising that there is all of a sudden a whole new slew of problems. Right. And so we call them blind spots because they tend to sneak up on people, and it can feel odd that what you worked so hard to get to now comes with its own whole set of problems. But knowing that they are very common to the growth stage businesses that we've worked with for years and years, hopefully helps people realize that you're not messing something up.
Yeah.
The sooner you recognize there's something over here that I didn't see, as soon as you're alerted to that and can start addressing it, then you can work through and resolve those problems and keep moving up to, to your next set of goals and achievements even faster.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I like the Traction books so much. It's really accessible to a lot of businesses that are between 10 and 50 employees, which is where the bulk of growth stage businesses are really located, probably in terms of just, population numbers. And it helps them to understand that in order to get to the next level, you're going to have to change your leadership approach. You're going to have a more systems thinking approach. You're going to have to improve and look at the structure of your business. And you're going to have to learn how to lead, which is something that most people don't, we're not natural born leaders, just like we're not natural born salespeople. So I think it's a really valuable book from that perspective. And I think there are other books that are good for other companies at different size stages. So more at the startup stage is like the E-Myth, which became an all too popular book. Too popular, I think, because it was so basic, in my opinion. But it really helps create the foundation for, like, are you going to build a company? Right? Because when if you have 10 or fewer employees, you're a leader with 10 helpers. But if you're going to build a 100-employee company, then you may be 10 leaders with 10 helpers each. And so it requires different things. So let's talk about your first blind spot. And I think you call it feeling frazzled, doing way too much. And because that ties in so well to that delegate and elevate, or my vital few trivial many tool. What is it? How do you deploy it?
Yeah. So feeling frazzled, I think it's so common in this growth stage of business that you find yourself and sometimes your team just consumed with all these activities that aren't really your core competency. That you kind of carry over that scrappy, figure it out, get it done, startup mentality into the growth mode. And there has to come a point where you realize that some of the things that you're doing don't really match your skills or your desires.
Right.
And that can be risky and kind of at worst, at best, it's just boring and unfulfilling to do things that you don't love to do. So we encourage our clients to think about, if you're not proficient enough at this task that someone would pay you to do it, your business shouldn't be paying you to do it either, right? Because they are.
And you're stealing money from the company if you're doing it on company time, or you're stealing your life because you're putting in more hours to make up for stuff. So
exactly.
Yeah. I like to refer to those zones as the zone. You either are now in the zone of incompetence or you're in the zone of competence. You're good at it, but you don't really like it. So, good.
Yeah. So I think, when you find yourself at that point, you need to really assess what are the things that you're doing? What are the things your team members are doing? Can some things be outsourced, automated? Is there other ways that we can do this? Another way to automate some of this stuff is just to clarify who does what when and make it more routine and more systems oriented so that you don't have to waste so much energy thinking about it. Yeah. And when you are able to bring in somebody else, you can give them the way that we do this here.
Yeah. So important. Like, I know you're all over the concept of process optimization, the importance of systems and processes. Look, you couldn't run a 70-employee firm if you didn't have good processes. And God, nothing worse than having an accountant that doesn't have good processes, right?
Right.
That's like help. So you have this other blind spot. You call it flying blind. Tell us what that is.
Yeah. So a lot of times business owners have in their mind an expectation of what the financials or what the numbers should be. But as your business grows, you just can't keep all those details in your head anymore.
Right.
Especially if you've leveraged other contractors or employees to take over some responsibility in the business. You just aren't as in tune with those details anymore. And so you start to recognize that without it in your head, you need it somewhere on a dashboard, on a financial report, in some kind of summarized scorecard. You need information to know how things are going because you can't keep it all in your head anymore. And without it, you're just flying blind.
Yeah, terrible. And it's not just the financial numbers. As you're telling that, I'm reminded of a business school professor I had back in the late 80s who said, you have to be able to feel the cash flow. And I find that people just lose touch with that. I was with a client yesterday, actually, and I said, well, I noticed your numbers have been in the red on your scorecard with me. Let's go back and see what's been going on, because they were green and you were doing great. And sure enough, his gross profit margin had eroded from 50 to 33%, which doesn't leave a lot if you've got a bloated overhead to make money. So that's a problem. But I think also flying blind is if you're not aware of what's going on in the market, in the economy, in social or political or regulatory, or there's so many influences outside, and that's why people need to do that SWOT analysis to find out what's going on outside the business and what are the trends and threats to this business. So that's great. Awesome. Okay. You have fighting fires. I know what that's all about too.
Yes. So as you get more people and more activity going on in your business, it can become harder to really determine whether or not you're fixing symptoms or addressing underlying causes. And so fighting fires is when you're spending all this time putting out whatever's urgent, instead of stepping back and figuring out what is going on that's causing this and putting a stop to it. And there's an old parable of some campers by a river, and they see some baby floating by in the river, and they jump in and save it. And then another one comes and they jump in and save it. And they're saving all these babies. And these two campers are just knocking themselves out trying to save all these babies in the river. One of them gets out and the other one says, "Where are you going? What are you doing? We've got work here." And the guy says, "I'm going upstream to see who's throwing these babies in the river." And that's what we often don't take time to do. And we're so busy putting out the fires that we forget that there needs to be a pause to really look upstream and solve the underlying issue.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I have a chapter in my book, a few pages, which I talk about blind spots specifically, and I have some very different blind spots than what you've come up with here. But I think you'll agree. Another one is where they overestimate their strategic capabilities, and that would be like akin to having a really big vision, but not being able to execute on that vision. And so because they're really good at strategy, I have a client who's really good at product development, but he's really lacking in the execution and the people disciplines to keep it all together. So the tactics fall apart. The strategy is great. The vision's big, but they don't get it done. So pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, one of the other blind spots I have that's related to that, another challenge that can come from having really strong vision and things still don't work out is failing to forecast.
Right.
So like you mentioned, a lot of especially entrepreneurial minded people love the visioning component and can even get to that strategic initiative level of like, this is how we're going to do it. And then things fall off at the execution. Like you said, we also see that people stop short of penciling it out.
Yeah.
They don't even forecast out, if we do the things we're saying we're going to do the numbers even work? And so they start down this path, not really knowing what they expect to get financially from these efforts, or if they're even, realistic, or if they're a stretch, or if they're delirious. A lot of our clients will come up with a big revenue goal.
Right.
And we'll say, okay, well, do you have the capacity to do that? Like, do you have enough people, or how many people do you have to hire to make that happen? When can they come on? When can they start? And we're not trying to, throw a wet blanket on their vision. We're trying to help them think through, like you said, penciling it out so that the execution has some thought around it and some metrics to measure against. So that failing to forecast blind spot, I think, definitely goes in hand with your blind spot.
Yeah, so much. And I think it's probably really frustrating to those visionary types to have these analytical perfectionist type advisors around them, unless they're interested in growing and changing.
Yeah, for
Because
sure. I mean,
we're pushing those questions on them all the time, and
yes.
let's see it. Like I love the exercise of, and I've been doing this exercise since I was in a .com company that was about to explode, really grow. Like we were building org charts and put like functional accountability charts and putting them on the wall and needing a really big wall to like show all these new hires that we were going to make and what they were going to be doing. And then someone had to put that org chart into a financial spreadsheet and say, okay, what's it going to cost us to have these people, and then what's the revenue going to look like? And so I think failing to forecast is a really big blind spot, and that's along the lines of failing to look outside in the market and what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of the small businesses and family-owned businesses that we work with don't have a CFO on staff that would think this way for them. And that's really how we got into providing this type of service to our clients, is because we saw so many of them with this gap where they don't need to go out and hire a full-time CFO, but they need to have someone who is asking these questions and helping them think through this part of the process so that they can have a better chance of executing on the vision and the strategy that they have laid out.
Yeah. Awesome. So how do you incorporate this as a CPA? Is this part of your business advisory practice? Do all your CPA clients get this, or and is it just weaved into the conversation with people, or do you sell them a different service? I mean, what can people expect from a firm like yours and getting this kind of input?
Yeah. So we do work with our clients in under an advisory approach. So if you're only looking for someone to prepare your tax return once per year, we're not the right fit. There's plenty of other CPAs out there like that. Our goal is to work with clients all throughout the year to help them utilize that information to make decisions. And so it can look different ways for different clients. It depends on where you're starting from. So all of this type of information we've talked about, whether it's forecasting or budgeting, key performance metrics, dashboards, all of that is out of a foundation of accurate, timely financial information. So some clients come to us and their bookkeeping is a mess, or their bookkeeper is leaving or retiring, and they don't have a foundation of information to even know what has happened. And therefore, we have nothing to base any forecasting or planning on. So the first priority is to help them shore up the bookkeeping and transactional component. Once we get past that, or if you come into us past that, then we can get into more of this forward-looking, proactive work where we're helping clients develop budgets that align with their vision and strategic plan. We're helping them forecast throughout the year to update based on what's actually happened and what we now know. What do we think it's going to look like for the rest of the year? Helping them develop both lagging and leading indicators in their scorecard so that they can really have a pulse on what's happening now in the business that will show up later in the financial statements. So those are all things that we do with clients, and we will also prepare their tax return at the end of the year and provide tax planning strategies. But we really help clients be more forward-looking and use this information, but it all comes from that basis of accurate, timely financial information. So we go through an assessment. And we can talk more about that if you'd like, to help figure out where are you now and what's working, what's not working, and how can we best help you kind of get through these different levels that build on top of each other.
Yeah, it's so similar to the work that I do, and I say we as coaches do, where we're helping them put together a scorecard with KPIs that is as many leading indicators as possible. So we're not just looking at, backward looking or lagging results, which would be the things that end up on the balance sheet or the income statement. So important to look at ratios that are going to be helpful to them in managing, like, are your receivables growing in relationship to your sales? And, what is the ratio there? Is it is it getting out of whack? And you won't see that until like 2 or 3 months after all of a sudden you're like, wait, why don't I have more cash in the bank? So, so important to have that happen. So if people come to you with a business and say, look, my number one goal is to pay no taxes. I want to reduce my taxes to like zero. Like, what's your thoughts on that? Is that the wrong goal?
It is the wrong goal, because the only way to pay zero tax is to make no money. And and so that's typically not your goal. Our approach to tax planning is to look at a long-term strategy that minimizes taxes over your lifetime and the lifetime of the business. So that does take more conversation and understanding, for us listening to the client and asking questions about what are your intentions and what are your goals and what are your kind of projected timeframes, because we want to use strategies and techniques for minimizing taxes, like retirement savings, college savings, timing of recognition of revenue and deduction of expenses, entity structure. There's all kinds of
defined benefit plans, 401ks, pension, profit sharing plans. Yeah.
Yes, there's all kinds of tools.
But this is the tail wagging the dog, right? If they were looking to have zero tax, then they're focused on the wrong objective, it seems.
Yes, you will pay tax at some point. And oftentimes people that are trying to get to zero tax today, when they exit the business, it'll be a huge tax bill at a much higher rate than if they would have minimized it over time.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So when you exit a business, that transaction is likely going to be taxable. And sometimes if you have accelerated deductions into a year, and then the year you go out, you all of a sudden have revenue and no more deductions to prepay. And so thinking about the tax bracket that you're in, the tax bracket you expect to be in later in life, is a long-term strategy where we're, again, just trying to minimize tax, keep as much of your hard-earned money as we can, but think of it in a long-term strategy and not be short-sighted of, I want to maximize deductions now without any regard to what that will do to me later from a bracket or income recognition standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're thinking in terms of someone who's looking at selling the business is saying, well, I'm only going to pay 20% capital gains tax because it was a long-term holding, versus if I take it out as income today, it's 40%. But I think it starts to skew the thinking around growth. And I think maybe it ties into my foundational thought, which is that revenue generation is limitless. Cost cutting is limited. So if you're just trying to focus on reducing your tax bill, well, you're probably going to be thinking in terms of reducing your revenue as well. Why not focus have a more optimistic bias and try and build the top line?
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we certainly work with clients every day to try to minimize taxes.
Yeah.
But it's from a strategic perspective and not just going out and buying things that your business doesn't need, to get a deduction. And yeah, like you said, just treating it as a business decision.
Exactly. And look, I believe, I imagine that there are certain people that come to you and they're just looking for every single possible tax credit program to try and minimize their taxes. And while that's all well and good, again, that's the tail wagging the dog. That should not be your primary strategy. So, all right. So we've been dealing in a fairly uncertain economy. I guess at all times, the economy is somewhat uncertain as to where it's going. this year and this few years with COVID has certainly been challenging, but like, how do we deal with some of these uncertainties in the economy? What types of things do you talk to your clients about? Um, and how do they prioritize things as they're trying to analyze like their business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, this is important anytime, but a lot of times you can get people to focus on it when there is a lot of economic uncertainty. It can kind of prompt people to take another look at this. So that's why we were able to bring this up a lot in these last, couple of years here with clients. I think probably the number one thing to know is how profitable are each of your products or services? Where does your business make the most money? Because it's not all equal. And it's not just about your gross margin, your profit margin percentage. Volume comes into play as well.
Yep.
But if you don't have any divisional reporting, if you just have a P&L that shows your revenue and you don't know how much profitability comes from whatever segments are relevant to you, this location, this product, this delivery method, whatever it is, without that information, it can be really hard to know what you need to change. But when you're armed with that information, you can start to think about, what do my customers need from me in this environment? And which of the things that I do are most profitable? How can I match those up? What do my customers need most that I deliver that is most profitable, and double down on that and let some of the other stuff that's not as relevant and not as profitable go away. You can start focusing all of your efforts and all of your marketing on what is relevant and profitable. But sometimes people just don't even know what is profitable. They know the gross, but they don't know the net.
So I'd like to unpack and elaborate on that a little bit more. So again, so valuable to have really good reporting that provides management insight and intelligence to management. So waterfall graphs that would show profitability by customer, by region, by product, by line of business, by salesperson, by all that stuff, I think is really valuable. And I want to elaborate that you said that it's not just about the gross profit margin, right? Because you could have an 80% gross profit margin, but only do $100,000 in that particular line. So is that really useful? So I think it's about the gross profit dollars more than it is about the gross profit margin. I think that's really important. And I think to also elaborate that getting out in front of your customers, and this sometimes has to be a CEO's job, or the CEO has to take real leadership in this area. Getting in front of the customers and finding out, how are we doing? How are other people in our same industry doing? What do you hear or what do you see? What could we do more of? What could we do less of? What could we do better? You've got it. It's not just a customer satisfaction survey, and it's not just a net promoter score figure. It's really getting belly to belly, I think, with you, or Zoom to Zoom with your better customers to find out how you could serve them even better and what's going on in the marketplace. And then lining those two things up. If you can identify your customers' pain points and be a prescription for solving those pain points, then that's going to be really valuable to you and to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I completely agree. Jonathan, are you a story brand follower, Donald Miller? I don't know if we talked about that.
No,
okay.
Tell us about what that is.
So Donald Miller has a book called Building a Story Brand, and it's about marketing, and he talks about how the elements of story translate into this framework for how you message and communicate with your prospective clients, and that so often business owners and leaders position themselves as the hero to save the day for our customer. But really, our customer is the hero of the story, and we are the guide. And we have to understand what is the problem or challenge that customer is facing that we can help them overcome. And the more we understand about what their problem is and how it makes them feel, and can position ourselves as the guide to help them overcome it, then they will look to us to help solve those problems. As long as we sound like another hero on our own mission, we sound like a competing person. So that's something I thought of when just in what you were talking about there. That's exactly what that book talks about, is to be the guide, not the hero. Understand their problems and show how you can solve them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective on that. I know that my book, Disruptive Successor, that the clients that I'm featuring in the book are the central heroes of the story. I am definitely the guide, but perhaps in my maybe my sales appointments with those prospective disruptive successors, I might come across as the hero for their problems, but I'm very much the guide, meeting them where they're at. So thanks for sharing that with me. Folks, check out Story Brand by Donald Miller if that interests you. So, all right, what haven't we covered that we should touch upon?
Well, I think we skipped blind spot 4 because I went right to I piggybacked off of your comment on, so we could go back to that one quick.
Yep. It's the fear of missing out, right?
Yes, the fear of missing out. So, and this might not sound like a problem, having more money than you know what to do with, but it actually can be a problem. So a lot of times as you start to get success and start to build some profitability, people start to get concerned that they're going to waste it. They're either going to pay too much taxes, like we talked about, or they're going to let costs creep in that they would have been much more mindful of if they had been, a little bit more strapped. And so we work with our clients to help them understand that budgeting is not just a tool to stretch your dollars or manage your operating costs. It is a tool to plan for what you want to do with all the money that you make in your business. How much should you pay yourself? How much do you want to reinvest in the business? How much do you want for research and development or product development? What do you want to do with this? How do you want to reward your team members? And so using a budget is a tool to plan and create intentionality around what you do with that money. It's not just a way to manage expenses and to minimize cost. It's actually a tool that you can make sure that you're being intentional with all of the money that you're able to generate from your business.
Interesting. So FOMO.
Yeah.
So this was really great. I want to just throw in a couple of my blind spots, ones that I talk about in my book, and have you comment on them. So I talked about overestimating your strategic capabilities, right, and not being really good at operations. I think that there's a real big blind spot, and I think you'll agree, on not being coachable. And this is like being a know-it-all, thinking that it's it's your way or the highway kind of thing. You run across that a lot with business owners?
We do. We actually have in our kind of customer avatar, one of the things that we feel is a really good fit for us is someone who is coachable and somebody who is willing to learn and grow. Because if you're not looking to be, guided or to learn anything new, you really don't need a consultant. You need an order taker. And there's people out there that are willing to do that. So we definitely see that. And I think you're exactly right about that being a blind spot of some entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Pat Lencioni talks about it in The Ideal Team Player, being humble, hungry, and smart. And I think we probably look for that in our clients. Humble, they're willing to learn. Hungry, they have an appetite for learning. And smart, meaning not book smart, but more like people, like EQ smart. So I have an interesting one. I think it's a blind spot, which is that believing the rules don't apply to you. And I've had some clients who will bring me in and they'll have me, run their 1-day planning session or 2 or 3 day planning session, and then, teach them how to run a weekly meeting. And then they don't show up to the weekly meetings, or they don't complete, let's say we're in Traction Tools or some software like that, and they're having to report on their rocks, their quarterly goals and their progress and put milestones in, and they don't do it. And so this type of leadership is really frustrating to me. I imagine
I
you
agree.
encounter
It's like
some of that too.
it's like a lack of discipline, maybe, and not wanting to be held accountable. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's something that we come across too. And it makes it really hard to help people if they really don't want to be helped.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, hey, Courtney, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. If people want to learn more about you or your organization, I know we'll have your contact information in the show notes. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, so you can go to our website at tdtpc.com, and there's a button on there. You can click to schedule a discovery call if you'd like to learn more about how we work with clients overcoming these blind spots, doing that initial assessment that I referred to earlier, just figuring out where you're at, what's working, what's not, and showing a path for how we can help you. So tdtpc.com.
Thomas Davis Thomas PC. Personal computer. Those are all, that's .com. That's how we'll find you. Awesome.
Perfect.
All right, Courtney, thanks for having you on. Thanks for being on the show today. Sorry. And folks, if you enjoyed this, share this with others, listen and subscribe. And thanks for being a loyal listener to the Disruptive Successor Show. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.